Today, I want to welcome on Tom Hamilton. Tom is a coach and a program manager at W10 Fitness in London. On top of that, he's also the head of education at the IFBA and the head coach at the PFCA, which is an education and mentoring platform. And on the side of that, he's also an online coach. So with that, Tom, welcome to the podcast. And how about you tell the listener a little bit about yourself and how you have come to be where you are today?
That's thanks. Good intro there, Roy. Thank you. I work across various businesses that are all slightly linked in one way or another. And my time is kind of divided between each of these things. And it does mean, you're busy, but I've always found that if you're passionate about something, it's like, it doesn't feel like work. And I actually have to typically kind of go the opposite way and try to hold myself back from doing too much, because I can get too involved in all this stuff, and then, it kind of then impacts your personal life and stuff. So I'm kind of wired that way, that I need something to hold me back. Otherwise, I'll just work all the time, and that can be quite selfish. So how I kind of got to the position that I'm currently in, I've been coaching for around about 10 years. Initially, I came into coaching. I used to play football for Bristol City. I never played any first team games, but I played with reserves and things like that up until I was 19. And to kind of cut the long story short, I ruptured my ACL twice in a row, so I didn't play for 2 years. My contract ran out, didn't get a new contract. In that time, I did spend some time in the gym. I also got myself into a bit of trouble, which ended up with me spending some time behind bars for a period of time. And that was actually how I got into the weight training, as cliche as that sounds.
I was just going to say.
And then when I came out of prison, I wanted to continue training, and I was going to the gym, and I seen like staff in the gym, and I was like, oh, what? I didn't even know what personal training was. And I was going with a friend at the time. He was like, oh, their personal training is like, you can do a course and get qualified and stuff. So I looked into that, got myself qualified, and then I was applied to work at a gym that was opening up near where I lived. I worked there initially as like a typical sort of like gym instructor, working the front desks. Believe this or not, Roy, I used to actually teach spin classes as well.
Oh, I need to see photos of something like this.
For those who don't know, I'm an absolute meathead. So, for me to see me on a bike doing spin class, shouting and stuff would be quite hilarious. I think for some people to imagine that. I also had more hair then as well. So yeah, I was like a gym instructor doing like classes and stuff like that, and I would just offer to train people for free, just so I wanted to get some experience and help people and sort of empower people with what I had done for my own body and changed, and the discipline that had installed into me, and all the other good things that we get from training that we then want to express with other people. Then over time, I managed to just build up clients on the side as well, still being employed by the gym. Then I got to the stage where I was able to go like fully self-employed in that gym and just paying rent. Then I did that, like working for myself for about 4 years. Then I had the opportunity to move to London and coach up there at W10, which I did because I felt it was like the right step for my personal and professional development. And yeah, I kind of haven't looked back then. It's sort of like just opportunities have opened up, and yeah, it's like I kind of feel that every sort of few years something new sort of comes up, or I'm constantly developing, which I think is, for me, it's important. I can get not bored, but you can get quite stale.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was also one of the reasons why I sort of left running like my own business. Was I felt that I was in a facility where I didn't feel challenged. It was very much comfortable for me. I knew it was like in my local area where I grew up. I knew everyone, and just wasn't a good environment for me long term. So, I just always tried to sort of push myself to get in environments where it's uncomfortable and you've got to learn more and basically keep upskilling yourself. Otherwise, I think it's easy to go stale. When you go stale, then that's when, you know, you're not performing well and things go wrong. That is a brief sort of how I got to where I am. I could probably chat, to be honest, for an hour about all that stuff, but
tell me about it.
quite self-indulgent.
Yeah, I can only, you know, I can only agree. Well, from my perspective, what you were saying there about always trying to raise the bar, you know, because it is easy to say, okay, well, I want to learn this new skill, or, you know, compete in something else, or whatever it is for you. But then once you get to a level, I don't want to say that you become too good at it, like a master or something, but it's like you said, it no longer stimulates you in the way that you want. So, but it's almost like once you raise that bar, no pun intended, you create like room to bring something else in, you know, and like you said, you're upskilling yourself and you're keeping things interested, and all of a sudden it's kind of like, okay, well, where do I take this? And for you, obviously, you had to change location, and you know, to create that new skills, to create that new challenge, and what as well. And what a place to do it, with W10, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was actually not lucky, I guess, but John Claude, who is the owner of W10, me and him had actually met probably 8-9 years ago on some courses at Body Development in Bath. And yeah, we just sort of become friends since then. And then he just approached me to say, like, oh, we're opening another facility, would you be keen? And I was already I think we go off a bit of a tangent here, but it might be quite a useful
Go for it, man.
thing for trainers especially. And I was actually in the process of, like, I'd spoken to JC. The reason that also they asked me is I was like, I'd had chats with him about opening a small group facility, because I was already doing some small group stuff, and this is going back, yeah, like five and a bit years ago. So when small group stuff wasn't very popular, but W10 were the first sort of people to roll that out properly.
Yeah.
And I knew JC, and I knew that they were doing this there, so I was keen to find out more. And what kind of ended up with me going to him for advice and on opening facility and stuff, actually resulted in me going to work there, and me quickly realizing that perhaps owning a gym was not what I wanted. Certainly at that time, wouldn't have been something I definitely wouldn't have had the skills to run a successful gym. If I may have got by and survived, but wouldn't have been successful.
Yeah.
And the longer that I've worked in this business, I've realized that for me personally, the goal that I think a lot of trainers fall into is that, you know, almost we start employed, we then build up a client base, work for ourselves, and then the next goal is we've got to open a gym, because that's how it should be. And
yeah, absolutely.
I quickly realized that gym ownership was not something for me, because it's totally different skill set, and also it's a totally different passion to coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you love coaching does not mean that you're going to be able to run a good business, a gym business. And yeah, it really helped me realize that, and then it's led me to find other areas that I can sort of push my passion that I like. But yeah, it's quickly changed my mind on the gym ownership and what goes into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting you were saying that as well, because something I sometimes find is someone might be good at owning a gym, but they might not be a good coach or trainer, and vice versa. You know, how many times, I'm sure you've seen it more than I have, but someone who might be a good or a really good coach or trainer all of a sudden feels the pressure to open a gym and it fails, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are kind of thinking, well, how's that happen? You know, they're such a good coach and they're a good person and stuff, but it's two complete different interests as well. Yeah.
Especially when you start adding staff to the mix.
Yeah, I can imagine, man.
That's the big one, is managing people and staff and things like that.
Yeah.
It's just different.
So with the whole leading on from being a spin instructor,
Yeah.
how so I know what you've accomplished in your competitive days. Well, that's still ongoing, of course. But how does someone go from, being a spin instructor to becoming the world drug-free powerlifting champion? Yeah, you were a champion, right?
Yeah. So,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, not in the, that there's the two organizations that you have. We won't go into it too much. IPF, which is a bit more decorated and does attract a higher
Hmm.
caliber of lifter, and then there's the World Drug-free Powerlifting stuff. I compete in the World Drug-free one.
Yeah.
Um, just personal preference more than anything.
Mm.
So yeah, no, but that was still something I'm immensely proud of, is to go and win a world championship in powerlifting. Even it is, yeah, something I'm very, very, very happy that I've managed to do, and I'd like to try and get back there again one day. But what sort of led me there was, I was actually the gym that I was working in. I've always been quite into a very sort of simple approach to training. I'm not one for complicating stuff. It's actually something that I think is a strength of mine, is that I can be quite narrow-minded in terms of focus. I don't get
Mm.
shiny toy syndrome and distracted by stuff. Like, if you wrote a program for me, Roy, and it was like, and I believe in it, I will follow that and I'll do it, and I'll be quite rigid, and I'm happy in that if I believe in it.
Mhm.
And I've always sort of trained the to be strong. It was always like appealing to me, like that progressive nature of strength training.
Yeah.
But I also liked looking a certain way. Like, I, I yeah, like if I think we all probably have it in some way, but if I didn't have abs, I'd probably feel very self-conscious. As
Mhm.
shallow as that sounds, it's just something that is important to me, and it's just like, as part of my identity, and I
Mhm.
like it. So I was training at the time, and the gym that I was in, there was an old bodybuilder who I used to train with sometimes, and I respected for advice and things like this as I was learning coming up. And he used to say to me, like, "Oh, you've got a great like starting point to go into bodybuilding." And I was like, "Well, I don't really. I have done bodybuilding type splits and stuff like that. I have done that, but I was like, I don't really enjoy training like a traditional bodybuilder. Like,
Mhm.
I used to do things, like 5-3-1 and stuff like that, where
Yeah, yeah.
I'm into. Um, but I did like that aesthetic side of things as well. So, and he kept saying this to me for a while, and then I was like, okay, I'll do a bodybuilding show. So I signed up to do a show with the BMBF, and I competed in that. And this is such a funny story, and I think if anyone who's ever competed, perhaps also in powerlifting as well, mate, you may have had this, is you think that you're like the first person ever who's got all this, like, you look great, and that you're going to go in there and you're going to smash it and you're going to win, and all of this, that you're like, for some reason you're just better than everyone else, like that you're like this unhidden gem. And I remember I went there and like did all the posing and stuff. I was so nervous, like I could barely eat before. And then you got on there, and I was like looking around, and like still at that stage, I was like looking around at the other competitors. Is bodybuilding is a bit like that, and you're looking like, oh well, I look better than this person, this. And I remember they were calling out like the places, so they called out like the top 5 or something, and I didn't even make like the top 5.
Oh
And I
man.
was just like, afterwards, I was like, wow, that is like a real reality check of, let's
Oh.
bring you back to earth, and you're not actually as good as you think you are. And that was, I probably needed that at that time, because what that lesson actually taught me was I had a lot of people who were around me, who were my friends and stuff like that, and no one was that ruthless truth, like to tell me the truth,
Yeah.
or perhaps had the knowledge and experience to tell me the truth.
That's true.
Perhaps no fault of their own. But then after that, I then went on to do another 4 or 5 shows, with like my best placement, I managed to come second in the UK Drug-free Bodybuilding Association
Nice
show.
one.
So I managed to get a couple of places. I come third in another one. But like during that time, my training, I still sort of trained what I call a power building type approach. So I'd always still do the big lifts, like squat, bench, and deadlift, and then accessory stuff, get a pump, hypertrophy, and all that jazz. So I managed to maintain a decent level of strength, even like apart from when you get to the last few weeks of prep and your dieting pretty tough. But after my last show that I did was the one that I came second in, and I just started to realize that bodybuilding for me was like it was taking up too much, and also I wasn't disciplined enough to actually get to the top. Like I would get to 3-4 weeks out and I just couldn't stick to the diet. I would just end up somewhere cheating or just not being as rigid as I could. And I started to also realize that, because I'd done all these shows within, say, a 2-year period, that I had started to change who I was, and my identity had kind of shifted quite a bit, because lots of my friends no longer wanted to really hang out with me because I was considered boring, and I was like training, or I know I can't do that because I'm dieting, and I was kind of just fell out of love with that. And then I sort of come across, how did I get into powerlifting? To go off a sort of a slightly different story. So I've come out of the bodybuilding, and I don't know if you know Phil Richards.
The name rings a bell. I've never met him.
So yeah, he's a very knowledgeable guy, but he's bonkers. In a good way. And anyway, like a group of me and some of my friends, we hired him for a seminar, and like part of the seminar we did some practical, and I'd never done like box squats at this time before. I didn't, and Phil had been and done stuff with Louis Simmons over Westside. That was what I was quite interested in. I was into Westside, reading about that at the time. And he's like, "Oh, does anyone want to come and try some box squats? We'll work up to it." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll try it." So at this seminar, I then did these squats with him, and he was like, "You'd be a really good powerlifter. Like you've got good, like you move well, blah blah blah." And he's like, "You should come and train with me." I was like, "Okay, great." So then I went and did a couple of sessions with him on some powerlifting stuff, and then I started to look into competing in powerlifting, etc. And then that was kind of it for me. I was like, I'd found somewhere a sport where I didn't have to be as disciplined with my nutrition as bodybuilding. Yeah. But I could still train in the way that I liked, and it still also fed the goal of looking good for me. It's like, not all, believe it or not all powerlifters have to be fat. So, and I was like, wow, this is great. And also I just absolutely love the discipline and the progressive nature of, trying to better yourself. And I think putting yourself in an external environment to be tested also was something that what I have noticed about myself is that I like that environment. I've just, I had that from football, was like going to play and stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I've kind of replaced that then first with bodybuilding and now powerlifting. And yeah, it kind of just went from there. And I think I started powerlifting maybe about 6 years ago, maybe. I don't even know how many competitions I've done now, maybe. Like between 10 and 15, I think. But also during that time I've had a few injuries and stuff. It's actually quite a good lesson as well for people, is that like in terms of progression during that time, it's like, and I'm sure you can relate to this as well, mate, is that your respect for adding 2.5 kilos over 12 weeks of training to your squat feels amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're earlier in your training journey and you're making, able to add 2.5 kilos each week, I'm telling you, just enjoy that shit. Because it becomes a lot harder.
But that's it. I mean, because, there are some people that I follow online and some friends as well who, compete in, weightlifting, powerlifting and strongman. And how often or how infrequent, should I really say, is, they may post something in their stories and they'll be like, ooh, new PB, it's 1.25. I'm busting my arse just for this pitfall 1.25. But then I suppose, like you said, it slows down, but then it's still an indicator, it's still feedback that you are improving in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I think what it helps to teach, and I think this is in training in general, is first of all, there's no end goal.
Yeah.
And secondly, is that it helps to teach delayed gratification that, don't like one, I don't really like this term, but to trust in the process.
Yeah.
And, to actually, you really do need to enjoy on the journey, you need to enjoy parts of the session. Now, there will be sessions that, you hate the gym and etc. But like taking joy in the fact that we can go to the gym, or that, I think as powerlifters, we can be geared to look at any little win. It's like, oh, this is a volume PB today. I haven't done this for this many sets, or that was one extra rep there. And it's like getting all those little wins certainly
That's
do
it.
keep you going.
And even the intrinsic stuff, how it felt, did it
Math,
feel easier? Do you still feel energized, after like 4 sets?
yeah,
These are the things that I find that people don't look at because they're always so focused on, I need to put more on the bar, or I need to lift a heavier dumbbell, depending on what, whatever the exercise or lift is. And I come back to something you said previously. Some people just don't know that. Some people are
yeah,
led to believe that it's always a numbers game.
mm,
Regardless if it's performance based or physique based or even just health based. The number of people who just want to go and train just to feel better, but they're some way subconsciously led to the numbers game, and it's like, well, hold on a sec, how do you feel? Are you coming out of a session, or are you finishing that squat feeling amazing, or are you feeling like dog shit, and that can make a huge difference.
oh, massive. I think that everything you just said there is a massive topic in itself. That we need objective based numbers, but we also need subjective stuff to go with that as well. It's like one, you don't have to be aligned to one or the other. It's like we need to account for both of these things. And I think the subjective stuff is quite easy to forget or sort of get caught up in. The people forget how far they've come or where they started. It's
Yeah,
like you're
absolutely.
complaining today that 100 kilos on your bench feels heavy. Like when we started, you could barely bench press 60 kilos. Like, let's put this in context. And also to go down another route is like, we're humans, we're not robots. What are your expectations here? I think I've seen you post about this before, about the Dan John sort of like the training sessions.
Yeah.
Not all training, very rarely, a very small percentage of your sessions are great, and a very small percentage of sessions are really bad. Most are just turn up, get it done, and you've got to just enjoy that. And like you say, look for, okay, actually that felt good today, or okay, I did less weight today, but the effort that I put in felt the same. So I shouldn't discredit myself just because I used less load.
Yeah, and there's something that when you mentioned there, and this sounds like such a cheesy analogy, but I heard something a while ago, I think it was about a year ago, where they spoke about find the treasure in the wreckage.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you are having like a rough day at work, it's been a long day, you've had a terrible meeting or traffic was awful, and then you went into the gym and you've maybe kind of, you've went to the gym even though you're not in the mood for it, and you've had, say, one great set of squats and the rest of your workout was average, but that's the one thing. And the number of times that you will actually walk out of a gym and be like, oh man, how good was that set? Even though you were in there for an hour and the rest of it was just forgettable, but you've turned up and you've found that little gem, you know, that again, the treasure in
Yeah.
the wreckage, as per se. And these are the things that are always overlooked, I find. Well, not always, but they're very common.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think this is where, we can, in some ways, I do like this, is that training does teach you many things that can be carried over to life.
Mm.
And, there's the discipline side of it, there's the delayed gratification, and there is that exact thing of what you just said of like looking for the small wins. And we can do that, take that same principle into our own lives, and without getting too deep on that stuff, it's like, just looking for what was your win today in general. Like, I don't know, I went for a walk. Like that's actually, I'm blessed that I can go outside and I have legs that I can go and do that out of my own free will. It's like, I think it's just being able to look at things differently and frame it differently, and have the self insight as well. It can be very easy to respond to training or anything sort of emotionally. Honestly, my missus will back me up on this, that I used to be the person, if I had one thing go wrong in my session, or like didn't feel exactly how I wanted to feel, my day was over. I'm not joking. Like, I'll be moody for a while, and she's like, well, you just like, you need to look at it this way. Or, it's the same with if some people who are like football fans, for example, their team loses on the weekend, their weekend's over. And it's like, there's more to life than that.
Oh man, God, for years I was like that. You know,
Yeah.
you look forward to a game and you watch it, and as you said, your team would get beat, even if they were like convincingly thrashed or whatever. And and I mean, I'm kind of going to relate this back when I worked in IT, but I would go into work and I'd be sat at my desk and I'd be looking at Sky Sports website and be like, oh my God, it's like, it's next game, man. You don't play for them, move
Yeah.
on. But and that's the thing, and I don't know. I don't know if it's personality type or whatnot, but I certainly see it with friends and even clients and stuff. And sometimes clients will give themselves a huge, well, a massive hard time. If a session, if they're highly motivated for a session, and they've not taken on board again how their days actually went, or their energy levels, or they're checking in.
Mm.
And if they have tried to push themselves to a level and that hasn't worked out, similar to what you said there, I'll maybe see it on their client profile and they're putting like negative comments and stuff. But then if I go back and look at
Yeah.
things and I'll say, well, hold on a sec, you did this, and you did this. This one little thing isn't nothing. That'll be better next week,
Yeah.
and it comes back to what you were saying previously on reframing it. And when you actually step back and look at that and you think, oh, okay, I am actually doing all right. And, my training is not terrible and I actually am doing quite well.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, as you were saying that, I immediately thought of two sort of scenarios that have come up recently with clients of mine. One of them, I kind of can relate to it, because I used to be very similar, in like very over analytical with my, like, film myself doing squats or something and be like, oh, this looks like this, or this, I need to be more like this. And then I'd send it to my coach or ask someone else about it, and they'd be like, that looks fine. Like, how did it feel? I was like, oh, well, it felt okay. Okay, well, what's the problem? It's like, so I had my client, she sent me over some deadlifts, and the load that she's using is like something that maybe 18 months ago was like a 1 rep max, and we were doing some doubles with it, and she's like, oh, these felt really hard. I'm not naming the person, but so it doesn't matter. She's like, also, it's time of the month, and it's like, they look rubbish. And I was like, number one, they don't look rubbish. All right, they're not, like, they're 95% good. It's just like a tiny bit, and it looks like the reps after you corrected yourself. Secondly, let's take into account, usually at this time of the month, your training feels harder. Like, let's just step back a little bit and don't be so hard on yourself. And another one was like, we had increased we increased the total amount of volume on the first exercise. So she'd gone from doing 3 sets of 5 at 100 to 4 sets of 5 the next week. But then her accessory movements, she wasn't able to increase. So they were like the same. She was like, oh, I feel really bad that I couldn't do more on this week on my accessory. And it's like, well, you're just looking at it wrong, because you actually made progress this week because you did more on your first exercise. So you've increased the load there, you've increased the volume of work that you've done, and you've been able to maintain the same amount of work you did last week on your accessory stuff with that additional fatigue from the first exercise. It's like, you've actually made progress this week. You're just looking at it wrong. And it is just finding different ways to view it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I suppose this kind of takes me on to the next thing I was going to ask you, in terms of, when it comes to, well, it's basically a simple question, but, the common problems that you see with, when it comes to people trying to get stronger, move better, or anything in the gym in relation to that. I mean, one of them I think you've highlighted there, that people are tend to always, they need to increase the weight, they need to increase the reps, or they need to increase the sets, but that's not always the case. But what would you say are the other common problems that you tend to see or hear?
I think, yeah, the chasing weight for the sake of weight at the expense of technique is something that is obviously very common. And I actually read about this the other day, is that also adding more weight to the bar, if your technique doesn't remain the same, doesn't necessarily means you probably get more from it having a lighter weight and doing the exercise properly, because you're going to actually place the stress on the muscle or where we want it. Whereas like just adding load and just moving it from A to B with no thought process behind how you get there is not going to be productive training. And I think that's something that one thing that people do fall into. I think another common area that people should perhaps pay more attention to is actually just being in control of movements in general, and not, that I can think of a number of clients that I've trained that just want to do things fast. They come from a background of perhaps, high intensity work or boot camps, stuff like that. They come into doing strength work and they want to apply the same principles to that. Especially, and I don't mean this in any way at all, but it's just more common. Females particularly are like this, more so because they're just not used to handling heavier loads, in my experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But also, in my experience, is that females are much more receptive to this, to actually learning and doing it. I don't want to say properly, but learning than what guys are. Guys tend to be a lot more ignorant and think they know better, and but no, like understanding the role and differences of different modalities of training, that there is a time to do things fast and go for it, and that other things require control and to actually feel where you're moving from, what muscles are you meant to be working here. Not that we have to all be like trained like bodybuilders in terms of like the mind muscle connection and stuff, but we should all have an awareness of where we're moving from, and increasing our sort of motor skills, if you like, and body movement is going to be beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, especially I personally find the two most important factors from a motor mechanical movement perspective would be the hips and the shoulder blades, the scap area. And I feel like oftentimes, especially when you go into the gym, and I'm going to 100% agree with you what you said previously when it comes to guys, is they just want to take hold of the weight and move it as quick as they can or as heavy as they can, and you can just see things like upper back, lower back just fall out of place, just because they don't know how to position, control their pelvis. They don't know how to pinch and retract the scapula area and stuff like that. And but yeah, something that you mentioned there about the female aspect of it is, I agree there, because I've certainly seen it in the past where you know, it probably is in relation to things like, you know, boot camps or gym classes and stuff where you're encouraged to
Yeah.
just move quick, and they're never taught how to actually move.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
then it's funny because I have said the second part of what you said to so many people, whereas when you get a female client, they want to learn, you know,
Yeah.
they ask the questions, and they'll almost be overly hard on themselves, you know, until they feel like they feel like they get it right. However, you know, the guys, I'm not going to say every guy, but guys are more likely to not ask for help and just get their head down and get on with it. And I'm
Mm.
actually going to, he's actually one of my best friends, but, you know, when I was teaching him and was trying to help him, and I would look at some of his numbers, and his numbers would be going up loads, and I'd be like, "Oh, nice! He's doing awesome, eh?" But then I'd look at him, and then he would come in for, you know, the odd session, and he was just cheating himself. You know, the technique, there was no range of motion, the technique
Yeah.
wasn't there, and I was saying to him, I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, dude! Like, lower the weight, lower the weight." You know, let this come, you know, let your arm fully extend, or let your hips come all the way
Yeah.
down. And the first thing he would always say is, "Oh man, that's too hard." It's like, of course it is, because you're not allowing your body to move in that position.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I would totally agree with everything you said there. It was kind of going to take me on to the next point of what I was going to say, is where guys are almost, it's almost like a racehorse effect, you know, where they've got the blinkers on and they just see forward, where, you know, but do you find, coming to the, you know, still in the conversation or the topic of the gender differences, do you find that guys are more common that of being too confident or overly confident when there's no reason to be, whereas women, and again, this is my experience, women are massively capable of doing more, but there's something about it. I don't know if it's in relation to the boot camp thing or whatever, but there's something about them that they hold themselves back from a confidence standpoint.
Yeah, I think first to touch on the guy stuff. I mean, ego is a big thing for many guys. I actually have a funny story about myself that uh, I remember I was very into Charles Poliquin for my first sort of 4 or 5 years of coaching. I actually think lots of Charles' stuff is good.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, it's still very good to this day.
Yeah.
So I was like looking for a Poliquin trainer around near Bristol, and this is how I come across Body Development and Tom Codrington. So I phoned up Tom, and I said, "Oh, I want to come and see you and like train with you and just basically learn from you." And he's like, "Okay." And I remember he was like asking me, he's like about some numbers and stuff, like to get an idea of where I was at. 'Cause he's like, "I don't want to, like, if you're not serious, don't waste my time," sort of thing.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Yeah, I can squat 200 kilos. I can do this." And he's like, "Oh, okay." So I turn up at his gym and we do a workout, and Tom's a bit like this. There was 3 or 4 other trainers there as well. And he's like, "Oh, like Tom, he's new here. He's says he can squat 200 kilos. We've got squats today. We'll see what we can do." So we're squatting. And I remember I must have got to about, I don't know, like 140. And he's like, he stopped me. He's gone, "Yeah, that's not a squat." It's like I was going like halfway down, and I'd come in with this big ego that I can do this, and thought I was really impressive. And he just really like completely put me in my place. Like, "Look, this is how you do it properly." Well, and then kind of taught me a lot from there. But I think lots of men probably need, like the thing that you highlighted as well. You need that, because if I had never you know, he had never said that to me, I don't know, I might have carried on training the wrong way for you know, I don't know how long.
Yeah.
And I think that guys do sometimes need that check of, yeah, this is
Definitely
how
agree
you
there.
do it.
I think that's a good piece of advice for anybody listening is, you know, whether you're starting off getting into weight training or strength training, or even just curious about joining the gym, or even if you are experienced, pull yourself back every so often and one of the things that I often, encourage clients to do is set your camera down. And if you're doing, like a squat or a deadlift or overhead press, etc., it's just put that camera down. Don't care what anybody says. Review it for yourself and say, okay, how could this be better? And again, I kind of come back to, if anybody is relatively new to the gym, is just take your time with it, similar to what you just said there, because it's easy to say, okay, well, I'm going to gamify this just because I always like to look at things from a gamifying standpoint. But if you're at level 1 and you say, okay, well, there's someone I follow on Instagram and they're a total boss.
Yeah.
They look like they're at easily level 10. How can I get there as quick as I can? And they just completely negate everything that you just said there, the technique, the feedback, how it feels, how it moves. If you can't move in full range of motion, or get technique right, go and ask someone, that may be able to help you, get a coach or a respected trainer to help you with that. But to just say, okay, well, this is my limitation, or ignore the fact that it's a limitation and just say, I'm just going to push on because numbers, or must be better now or yesterday,
Yeah, and I think that actually, a point that you said there about the Instagram stuff is also people comparing themselves in terms of movement and what technique should look like. Like mine and your, I'm like 5'8", you're 6 foot what? Our deadlifts and squats look very different. Yeah, they're both technically be classed as sound. Like they're perfectly fine, but they look very different. But to the untrained eye, for someone who's perhaps watching someone else on Instagram and are totally different body types, and they're like, oh, my squat doesn't look like that, I must be doing it wrong, or I'm going to start trying to squat like that. And it's like, well, that's not actually right for your body.
Yeah.
And that's where having a coach, or at least someone that you can get some reliable feedback from, is really important. But to come back to your point about the female training, and I've found that they do want to soak up more, and that they can often do more for sure. And I think it's how often have you seen this? And I know that you're going to say, yeah, is you have someone who, if a female, she deadlifts 80 kilos for 5 and it looks absolutely perfect. We put 85 on, she can't lift it for 1.
Oh, yeah, brought me right back to an old client of mine who was prepping for her very first powerlifting competition. It was the strangest thing. I didn't get it. So her entire prep, she was fine. She came in for a session, and for some reason, what was it? She could definitely deadlift. I think it was 100. And we came in and I says, okay, well, let's look at it. We'll just look at technique and we'll take your time. We'll just do singles. She could barely get it off the ground.
Yeah.
I dropped it to 95 and it flew up.
Yeah.
Like it was nothing. And I'm kind of like, and even she was looking at me and saying, why? And I was like, it's up here. It's in your head, it's because you could.
I mean, yeah, I think naturally sort of guys are not, I don't mean the aggression in terms of, outwardly like kind of, but it's this internal aggression and intent that I think guys more have naturally to push that way. Whereas I think we almost have to teach that in lifting weights and stuff to females a little bit more. Because it just takes that little bit more of like, or if I think it's perhaps sometimes it's a confidence thing that they don't want to be seen as like they've got to suddenly grunt a little bit, or they've got to strain a bit more. And I think it comes down to confidence more than anything, which is where like as a coach, it's so cool. And you'll be able to relate to this. Like, I bet you managed to get that client in the end to smash that deadlift, and it's like you helped empower her with that confidence to be able to do that.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I sometimes think as well, although that there's almost like a huge shift over the last, say, 18 to 24 months in women in strength training and
Mm.
embracing, competition as well. Even if they
Yeah,
don't ever want to compete, if you go into gyms now, even like a pure gym and stuff, look at how many females are trying to deadlift or
mm,
are deadlifting and squatting, and they're dying to get their hands on a barbell,
yeah,
compared to previously where the idea of just going near anything over, this is going to sound really shitty by the way, but anything over say 5 kilos would just be like, oh, that looks too heavy. But there's, because of this exposure and encouragement and the green light to say you could totally do this.
mm,
I could show you, or someone else shows you, if they've got a trainer or coach elsewhere. And the difference that you see in them when they realize how capable they are. And again, this is where I think social media or something like Instagram can be either beneficial or detrimental. It can be beneficial because if they follow someone that they really look up to, and they'd be like, holy shit, look at this, what this person done, that's incredible, like that's heavier than X number of guys.
yeah.
And me and you have both seen plenty of women that have probably outlifted, most guys I know.
But I think I might upset some of the guys from my gym with this, but like we've got pre this situation, we had like 250 members, and I would say that the percentage of females, like pound for pound, they beat the guys. Like they really get after it, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it's 1,000,000%. But yeah, so something you mentioned, you touched on previously was, how they approach things from a training perspective. And this kind of leads me on to the differences in training volume between, men and women.
Hmm.
I mean, I know that you have a preference for 4 times a week. I know I do. However, is something I tend to notice, and you see this quite a lot on the evidence side of things. I think Greg Nuckols wrote an amazing article on it, on how much more women can do in terms of training volume to actually progress. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, evidence-wise, if you look at all the research and stuff like that, it points towards that, women's recovery, whether it's between sets or in general, is better than guys.
Mm,
Um, but I do always wonder with this, is it because there's two arguments to what I'm going to put forward. Is it because the overall volume is just lower in most cases than men anyway?
yeah.
Or there is the argument though that, per body weight, they're kind of, if we match up as a percentage of their, what they're lifting as a percentage of body weight, it would probably be similar. So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting sort of debate, but I certainly can, anecdotal evidence would say from coaching, women definitely recover. It's like, if I did a set of 10 squats, all right, I've not got the best engine in the world, but I need some, at least 2 minutes, at least, to feel like I'd be ready to go again and be able to lift the same weight.
Mm.
Whereas, like, I've trained some people and they have like a minute rest. They're like, oh, I'm ready to go again. And I watch them lift exactly the same. And it's like, I just couldn't do that. Especially in stuff like hit type stuff, if we're
Yeah.
doing things like that, like even if it's like 30 seconds on, 30 off, I find that they can maintain a better pace. But whether it's a strength output thing, is that like, I often find that guys can push harder in that
Mm.
period, but they need longer recovery.
Yeah, it's something you mentioned there I thought was quite interesting was I've personally seen, I've maybe programmed, higher volume deadlifts, for example.
How often have you programmed, like looked at a program and you're like, I can't believe I'm actually writing volume?
Oh man, I did that. I did that on Monday, and that was for a lockdown workout. I was just like, oh wow, they're gonna kill me for that one. But yeah, like as you said, when it comes to deadlifts and stuff, and I've seen, and I'll put in the rest period, and I'll put, between 2 and 4 minutes, because that's what I would take, and that's what I
Yeah,
would recommend. Like
yeah.
you said, the evidence. But then I'll speak to them, I'll look at their check-in, or I'll speak to them and they'll be like, oh yeah, I was okay after like 90 seconds. So I just kind of went. I was like, oh, I would maybe kind of follow the 2 to 4 minutes, just in case you get injured or you haven't recovered enough. But then that's what they would say. They would say, oh, I felt fine. So I just went.
Mm.
Like, okay, well, fair enough. Go for it. But, kind of be careful here.
Yeah.
Don't want to
Yeah,
be
no,
a gym
it's
fail
the,
video.
the recovery certainly is better, and then yeah, I think overall in my experience, they can hand like I said, I've ripped programs that I'd look at the volume and I'd be like, I'd die if I did this workout, and the client would be like, yeah, that was fine, I really enjoyed it, didn't seem too bad. I was like, it's crazy. Whereas yeah, guys do tend to be more. I think the only time where it looks like guys end up doing more is when they put what I would call like junk volume in, and
Yeah.
just chuck poor exercise selection and just do loads of pointless sort of sets that is not really stimulating much response.
Yeah, that kind of leads me on to the next point that I was going to make, because something that we touched on at the start of the conversation, your entry into bodybuilding. I've got my personal one, was more aesthetically driven as well, with the magazines and bodybuilding and stuff as well. And with that, there comes the common to go to body part splits,
Mm-hmm.
chest, triceps Monday, back, biceps Tuesday, etc. And when it comes to leg day, they'll do leg pressing, calf raises until whatever. But sometimes in conversation, especially when it comes to speaking to people online or even your clients, where you may say to them, what have you been doing? And they'll say something along these lines, but they've either been told or they've been led to believe that that style of split training is quote unquote the best. But I don't know if I'm just looking at this from a coaching perspective, but there seems to be more people, I'd probably say over the last 6 months or so, exploring different training splits, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like upper, lower, or push pull legs. I mean, what's your take in this, or do you even have a preference?
I do have a preference. I'd say depending on the goal, uh, the individual, like their personal preference.
Yeah.
Um, because before we go and dig into this, it's like if we're looking at how we program for someone, it's like needs, what does the client need and what do they want, and
Yeah.
like what's the goal? Like they're the three sort of things that we need to sort of juggle, and it's like finding okay, because there's many ways. Let's say you wanted to just look better naked. It's like there's many ways. Each of those methods the splits you've said could all work.
Yeah.
But this person may like the feeling of getting an upper body pump. So we're more likely to say, okay, we're going to do, a push pull or an upper lower split. If I know that I'm only going to see this person 3 times and they're not someone who's an advanced lifter, their recovery is pretty good, I'm likely to go 3 full body workouts.
Mm-hmm.
And there's pros and cons to all of these things. And I'm not married to one, but if I had to say the way that I do go is full body. It could be upper lower, then we could have legs like push pull. It would typically be how I'm going to go for one of those. So I'm not a body part split person. Although let's take yourself for example, where we're like, you're like, oh, I feel like doing an extra day's training this week. What should I do? And we're like, oh, should we just do an extra day of guns? Like just pure vanity, just get a pump. And like sometimes that might have a place in a program. But my go-to for most people, if we're talking like general pop, is who can usually is like 3 times a week they'll train, is full body workouts.
Yeah.
Typically. And what the advantage to that is, what we do get is when we train each movement in that session is we're a little bit more fresh, providing that the program is structured right, and we're not like doing squats every day or something like that where they're tired in the next session. But you're a bit more fresh and you don't have the fatigue per session. But that can also be seen as a negative, because sometimes you might want to get that response of really fatiguing the muscle to generate some hypertrophy, or which you'd get more so from having an upper lower type split. And also, if someone's recovery is not great, the upper lower split allows for someone to have longer recovery in between. So I'm not, I don't like to not answer questions out like in a black and white way, but I'm gonna be, it depends on the person, the goal, and
one of the main things that you touched on there is kind of what I tend to look at, is what's recoverable from, because they may like, again, something you touched on was squats. However, if they're doing more frequent higher volume based squats or squat related movements, but they can't recover from them, then you'd really have to have a look at that and say, okay, well, let's address how frequent it is, or maybe, as you said, go to like a whole body, because over the last, I'd say 6 months or so, I've had more clients ask for whole body, especially if they are working quite a lot, and maybe they're only able to work train between 2 and 4 times a week. And if they get a week where they can only manage 3, at least if they're doing whole body, they know that they're ticking all the boxes.
Yeah, they get exposure to each movement pattern, and exactly that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I said, if I kind of come back to the whole quote unquote bro split. Sometimes that sort of thing tries to force people to go and do all these sessions, regardless if they've recovered from them or they've got the time for them. And if they're not, that can sometimes make people feel like they're falling behind, because they'll say, okay, well, last week I only managed 3. I know I've got to do better. And it's like, you don't. You need to do what you can do and you enjoy doing, and again, what you recover from.
Yeah, and I think that there's a big one you said there, is enjoy. If someone's not enjoying, like there's a balance between, we hate Bulgarian split squats, but we know they're good for us. And in a weird way, part of us probably enjoys them. But it's like, as a collective, as part of a program that we enjoy. And and then what I've come to realize over time is also that, clients will come to us. So if you're a trainer, listen to this, is like, we are not the answer always to everyone. There will be people that just don't like our way of training, and that's okay. Like, you have to just accept that not everyone's going to buy into you and your way of doing it. And that doesn't make them a bad person, doesn't make you a bad person. It's just, some people want to train like a bodybuilder and they think it's better. No matter how much evidence you show them, or whatever else, that's just what they enjoy, and that's why they like training. And it can be frustrating, but you just got to learn to accept these sort of things.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, we've certainly, again, the fact that you've mentioned that, you've obviously come across plenty of people like that, and I know I have as well. And I'm going to come back to the Instagram thing, where we've both clearly seen this, where you'll see these influencers, saying, okay, well, this is how you can build big glutes. And they're just doing loads of tiny little accessory exercises. And then they're selling these huge products, and it's like it's like a false perception of progress. So if someone is just doing, say, like 10 sets of, banded glute bridges, and they get this idea, okay, well, if I keep doing these, I'm going to build big glutes. But then if me or you used to rock up and kind of say, oh, no,
What are you saying about my glutes, mate?
but then who are we to turn up and be like, you're kind of wasting your time? But if they're doing that and they feel good, and that gets their buy-in, and that gets them into the gym.
That's it. Yeah.
And you could almost look at it from a gateway drug, if that's their gateway drug to then doing barbell glute bridges, Bulgarian split squats and stuff. Who are we to turn around and say, no, that's crap?
Yeah, well, I think also there's this element, right? If this person, let's say they've come from doing nothing, and they start doing, some stupid booty program, for that person, that's actually going to be a form of progressive overload, because they haven't been doing anything. So they are actually going to see some positive changes from it.
Yeah.
Now, what we hope for is, like you said, actually, it kind of acts as a bit of a funnel in towards proper training, because what they will come to realize is that they can only go so far doing these stupid exercises, and that at some point you're going to have to lift some weights.
Yeah, it's again, sorry for anybody listening who does love these booty programs. But then from a guy perspective, I've seen so many of these, $1 chest exercise.
Mate, don't worry, we've got something. We've got something for you. The Bold Guys booty package coming soon.
We promise results. $2.99. What a deal. Yeah, I mean, at this moment in time, I mean, what are we, 6-7 weeks into lockdown?
Something
and
like
obviously
that.
People they're in this fighting for motivation to train. Some people, I've seen so many people online. I even saw an example of it this morning, just say that they're hating their home workouts. And I mean, okay, it might not be ticking the boxes that they were maybe previously doing in a gym, and that's fair enough. But again, you and I both know that there's ways to make home-based workouts, even with something like body weight, a band, and 2 maybe lighter dumbbells. But for someone who's at the moment is trying to dig deep every single day and say, okay, well, I know I've got to work out, however, it's not the same as a gym and I'm kind of bored of it. What are the type of things that you personally feel and are currently programming for people that can make something like a simple and maybe boring workout highly effective?
I think first of all, it's being honest with yourself about what you're prepared to do in terms of how many times are you prepared to train. Because if you be like, right, I'm at home more, I'm going to up my training to 5 times a week, and then you miss the first 2 days, and then you're like, fuck this, like, I'll start next week or whatever. I think the first thing is to just be honest with yourself about what you're actually prepared to commit to, and make that super low. Make it easy. Make it easy. Like, I'm going to do 2 workouts. Like, that's my commitment to myself. Start with that. And I'll be the first to admit that I find training at home pretty uninspiring. Just, the first few weeks I actually didn't do anything. Luckily I had access to a gym like once or twice a week, but on my plan I was meant to do some stuff at home, and I just didn't feel motivated to do it. What I've personally found help myself and like clients is, if you're in a house with, you have a partner or something like that, if you can get them involved or get them to at least hold you accountable, can be helpful. I think designing workouts that are not too long and don't overwhelm to look at. You're like, oh my God, I've got to do all of this. And yeah, I think that's like a big thing. Something that I did with my wife the other week was that she really didn't want to train. And I actually stole this from James Clear from Atomic Habits. I was like, just go and put your kit on. Like, just go and get changed. And then when she's going to get changed, I'm already setting up stuff for her. And I was like, let's just do the warm-up. So we do the warm-up. She's like, I know what you're doing here. She's like, I'm going to do it. But it's like, sometimes you just need to get started, even if you feel rubbish. It's like, just get started. That's probably the biggest one, I think, is it's cliche, but you never regret the workout afterwards. Like, you're going to feel better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we want to build momentum and build habits. And because once you start doing this more often, then you'll get into it and you'll actually start to enjoy it a little bit. Like the last couple of weeks, I've actually enjoyed my last few sessions that I've had at home. Granted, the weather was nicer and I was able to go in the garden and do them.
I've been up here, mate. It's raining today.
So I think that having this mentality of, okay, I'm just going to do something. Even if I look at my program and I'll say to myself, I'm just going to put my kit on. I'm just going to do the warm up. And if you can make things challenging in different ways, we could have a separate pod just chatting about different ways to make it challenging. So I won't go into that. Between us, there's enough content on both our pages to kind of get some ideas around that. But make the workouts fun and enjoyable. If you can recruit someone else to do it with you, then great, get them involved. It could be a good time to get a family member involved into fitness that you can try and convince for a while. But no, the big one is like, just get started. Even if it's like you have that voice in your head going, oh, God, you don't need to do it. Like, it's rubbish. Just chill out, watch another episode of Netflix, and then I think that also, just to add to that, is have separate areas where you do stuff in your house. If you have that option, it's like the front room or wherever your TV is. Okay, that's where we chill and we do nothing and we watch TV, etc. If you have the option of then like having somewhere where you can have your gym kit and like, this is where I train, this is where I work, and you have these different areas, so it's like, at least there's some kind of structure in there. Otherwise, it can be quite hard to feel quite motivated when your partner or there's the TV on and you're training. It doesn't work. So it's about like setting your environment up for you to succeed as best as you can.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. One, I'm going to come back slightly to something that you mentioned on James Clear, and there's something that he talks about in his book, and I use it quite a lot with clients anyway, who are maybe struggling with a specific habit or a behavior. Is he calls it habit stacking. So if there's one or two things that you find are easier to achieve, then you're gonna more likely lean towards them, and then just sack off the thing that you know that you should do, and you actually do want to do it, but there's that, as you said, there's that how to get going. And it's also creating, okay, well, let's join the dots here. So I've finished my work. Let's just say you finished your work. You're really looking forward to dinner. However, you've just taken 3 different behaviors there. So one of them is ending work. So what are you doing to end work? Are you having to close your laptop and put it away? Or are you having to put your phone in a drawer and then get out of your clothes, if you're like me, that you're still wearing outdoor clothes indoors, even though you're never going outdoors. So that's an action. Yeah. And then you've got this other action, which is maybe starting to prepare dinner. So they're 2 different actions. So create the stack. So almost do like a checklist and say, okay, well, when this action is completed, I then start next action, which is, as you touched on previously, putting on your gym gear or taking the dumbbells through or going into that part of the house. And then once that action's finished, you then go into the third one. And I think there's something I suggested to one of my clients who trains with her sister, and they don't live together, so they're kind of missing that. They've both
Mm.
found that their motivation to train's kind of going down a bit. And I suggested something. I don't know if she's done it, but I'm speaking to her next week, so I'll find out. But I suggested even doing Zoom sessions with her,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
so both of them set up their
yeah,
laptops or their phones. They can stick on the same playlist
yeah.
and just both train, and they can talk to each other and laugh and stuff. So
Mhm.
it's kind of,
Good idea.
yeah, trying to bridge a gap somewhere that gets that buy-in and enjoyment factor.
Yeah, I think that is a good way. If you have got someone like that, it's like you make an appointment with each other to sort of say, we train on these days at these times, and we'll meet on Zoom or FaceTime, whatever it is, and we go through it together.
Do you find, last question, I promise. Do you find that with being at home, one of the things that you touched on was making workouts even, shorter, just so when you're in the workout, it's not going to be for an hour or an hour and a half. Do you find it's a good opportunity to even work on areas that you maybe just dislike, like pause work or eccentric work, just to say, okay, well, I know I can do 30 push-ups, for example. However, if I do 10 push-ups with a 4-second eccentric or a 4-second pause, that I'm going to enjoy that more because I've actually worked harder for that, and I know that there's a more stimulation for that. Do you find that's a good opportunity to introduce that style of set methods?
Yeah, definitely. I think also what we can hopefully come out of this with is actually better movement quality from doing things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and that people are actually going to come out of this in some ways stronger and with better, yeah, like better control in movements, and perhaps a better understanding of how to move as well, by slowing things down, adding pauses and stuff, and understanding, I think, that there are different ways of creating a positive training response. And hopefully it would have opened up a lot of people's eyes that we don't have to just chase weight all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the main thing, and I personally see it as almost like a learning curve.
Mm,
Especially if you are used to lifting weight and you're not used to lighter weight or banded stuff or body weight. If you can realize that you can retain strength or even get stronger by just changing the angle of doing an incline decline push up,
mm.
or changing the tempo of the movement and stuff like that as well. But yeah, it kind of comes back to the whole adage of, okay, it's not ideal. No one wants to be in lockdown, but how do you make the best out of it? Do you just keep kind of looking at, videos and photos of you in the gym and saying, oh man, I'm not in the gym. This is shit. Or do you say, okay, well, I'm not in the gym, but here's an opportunity to learn something and get better. And when I go back to the gym, yes, I'm stronger, I'm more mobile. And oh, look, the hip pain that I had for, 6 or 7 months, I don't have it anymore because, I embraced whatever I was doing at home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it'd also be quite interesting. We won't go into this too much now, but when we can actually go back to the gym, it's like people are going to have to be very wary of trying not to chase back to where they were.
yeah.
That's like a sort of whole nother story.
Oh man, I'm not like, a part of me is looking forward to that, and another part of me is gonna be, oh no, what's happened? It's, like, I still look the same, but I'm not moving the same. Like, oh,
Yeah,
oh,
the first few weeks will be a little heavy, right? It's just
oh
going to be
man.
like everything feels hard, and then you'll be back to where you were, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's it. But anyways, Tom, I really, really appreciate your time, mate. For anyone listening, and you touched on previously there, we could have honestly unpacked another hour talking just layer upon layer when it comes to training and improvement and everything in between. But something you said there was, between your Instagram and my Instagram, I certainly know that you've been putting up a number of amazing educational based posts on, some of these topics. So if anybody would like to have a look at this content or even ask you any questions on what we've spoken about today, where could anybody find you?
Instagram is the best place to find myself, and ask me any questions at Live Strong, Look Strong. Also, if the other sort of businesses that I'm involved in, if you're a trainer, we're actually running a free 6-week course over at the PFCA at the moment for coaches. All you have to do is just join our Facebook group, which is free. We just have to approve it. You can do that through Instagram as well. And then also, if you're a gym owner or a prospective gym owner and you're looking at help or what to do in this sort of time, I know that there's lots of people doing this and helping, but we help over 120 gyms in our network. So we've got a lot of experience with this over at the IFBA. We'd also be happy to help people with that as well.
Brilliant. No, it sounds like, yeah, a lot of really good resources, and I can only back them up there. The IFBA, so many friends involved in that, and they couldn't speak any highly of it. And with you being part of the head honchos, the crew leading it, it's certainly makes a difference, that's for sure. But I want to say thank you once again, Tom. It's been a really good chat. Have to get you back on just to, like I said, talk about all the other topics and whatnot. And but anyways, yeah, let's leave it at that.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, mate. I appreciate it.
No problem. You're welcome, mate.